Just breathe, smile, and this ends in 10 seconds.
They called me hired, Daniel. That word doesn't wash off in front of cameras. Where did you get that last name, Patterson? It's mine. My father worked in this building before I was ever born. I am so incredibly proud of you.
The flash went off 3 times before Naomi Patterson understood what was happening. She was standing in the sunlit glass atrium of Kang Tower, a wedding ring she had worn for exactly 6 hours suddenly heavier than it had any right to be. Beside her, Daniel Kang held her hand like it belonged there. Then a reporter's voice cut through the applause. "Mr. Kang, is it true your wife was hired?" The music stopped. Every camera in that room turned toward Naomi at once, and for the first time since she'd said yes to this arrangement, she had no idea what to say. Daniel's grip tightened, but his face stayed calm, trained by years of boardrooms. Naomi's did not have that training. She felt her cheeks burn as whispers moved through the crowd like a struck match through dry grass. Somewhere near the back, a woman in a cream suit smiled the smile of someone who had just gotten exactly what she wanted. That woman's name was Grace Whitfield, and later, Naomi would learn that Grace hadn't smiled because of the scandal. She'd smiled because, for one unguarded second, Daniel had looked at Naomi the way a man looks at something real. But that was later. Right now, Naomi Patterson, 41 years old, a woman who had spent her whole life refusing to be anyone's charity case, stood in front of 200 strangers and a very public accusation, and she did the only thing her mother ever taught her to do when the room turns against you. She lifted her chin and she did not run. If you have ever been misjudged in a room full of people who already decided who you are, you understand exactly how Naomi felt in that moment. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching this from tonight, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what Naomi finds hidden inside this family before the story is over. Because what happened next didn't just threaten her marriage. It uncovered a truth Daniel Kang's family had buried for 23 years. 3 weeks earlier, Naomi had no interest in marrying anyone, fake or otherwise. She was standing in Kang Tower's lobby to interview for an event coordinator position, wearing her one good blazer, when a small boy in a school uniform crashed into her legs, crying, lost in a building 3 times too tall for a 7-year-old. She knelt down without thinking, wiped his face with her sleeve, and made him laugh before his father even found them. That father was Daniel Kang. He didn't offer her the coordinator job. He offered her something stranger. His late father's will required him to be married within the year to keep control of the company, or the board, led by his cousin Marcus Kang, would take it from him. Daniel needed a wife on paper. Ethan, his son, needed someone who didn't flinch when he cried. Naomi needed to pay off the medical debt her mother left behind. It was a business arrangement. Nothing more. That was the plan. The plan lasted exactly 1 dinner. Ethan asked Naomi to stay for dessert, then to stay and read him a story, then every night after that to just stay. Daniel watched his son laugh in a way he hadn't laughed since his mother died. And something in Daniel's careful, guarded chest loosened that he did not give himself permission to name. He was a man who ran a company on schedules and signatures, and he had no line item for what it felt like to watch a woman he was paying to be his wife tuck his son in like she'd been doing it for years. Naomi told herself it was a job. She told herself that every single morning, folding the feeling down small enough to fit inside the contract she'd signed. She was still telling herself that the day the cameras caught them at the gala and asked the question she had no answer for. Inside Kang Tower that night, after the gala ended and the last reporter was escorted out, Daniel found Naomi standing alone on the balcony, still in her wedding white, arms crossed against a wind that had nothing to do with why she was shaking. "You should have told me the press had a source inside our own legal team," she said, not turning around. "Someone leaked our contract, Daniel. Someone who wanted this to blow up in my face instead of yours." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't know," he said. "I would never let them do that to you. Wouldn't you?" Naomi turned to face him. "You hired me to solve a problem. Tonight I became one. Which version of me were you actually protecting in there?" The question landed harder than either of them expected, and Daniel had no answer that didn't sound like an excuse. "Say something true, Daniel," she pressed. "Not the boardroom version. The real one." He opened his mouth twice before anything came out. "The truth is I stopped thinking of you as a solution weeks ago," he admitted quietly. "I just didn't know how to say that without it sounding like a business update." It wasn't enough to fix the night, but it was the first honest thing he'd said to her since the ring went on her finger. Before Daniel could speak, Marcus Kang appeared in the doorway, unbothered by the tension, holding 2 glasses of champagne like a man arriving at his own party. "Beautifully played, cousin," Marcus said. "Hiring a woman to save the company. Very romantic. The board meets Monday. Bring your marriage license and bring proof it's real. Or I'm invoking Uncle Samuel's family stability clause myself." He left without waiting for a reply. Naomi watched Daniel's hands curl into fists at his sides, and for the first time she understood that this fight was never really about her at all. It was about a company Daniel was terrified of losing, and a father he had never stopped trying to make proud. If you think you already know who the villain is in this story, comment your prediction below, because the next truth Naomi uncovers is going to change everything you think you understand about this family. Stay with me. 2 days before the board meeting, Grace Whitfield found Naomi alone in the archive room, sorting through old company photographs for a charity display. Grace went quiet when she saw the name Naomi had written on a folder. "Patterson. Where did you get that last name?" Grace asked, careful like she was stepping onto ice. "It's mine," Naomi said. "My father was Jerome Patterson. He worked in shipping and logistics for some company here in Empire City, years before I was born. He never talked about it. He just got quiet every time someone mentioned Kang Industries on the news." Grace's face changed completely. She reached into a locked drawer and pulled out an old photograph, its corner torn, showing 2 young men shaking hands in front of a factory gate. On the back, in faded pencil, someone had written 2 names. J. Patterson and S. Kang, 1998. Naomi's hands went cold. "That's Daniel's father," she whispered. "And that's mine." Grace nodded slowly. "Your father and Samuel Kang built the first warehouse contract together. They were partners, Naomi. And then your father was accused of stealing from the company, fired without a trial, and blacklisted from the entire industry within a month. He never worked in logistics again." Naomi sat down hard in the archive chair, 23 years of her father's silence suddenly making a terrible kind of sense. "Everyone told me my father was the problem," she said quietly. "I need to know what really happened to him, Grace. And I need to know if the man I married had anything to do with it." That question sat in Naomi's chest like a stone through the rest of that week. She watched Daniel differently now, searching his face for guilt he did not seem to carry, because he genuinely didn't know. But not knowing didn't make his family innocent. It only meant the truth had been buried somewhere deeper than Daniel had ever thought to look. And Naomi, for the first time since she'd said yes to this arrangement, had real leverage. She could walk into that board meeting and hand Marcus Kang exactly the scandal he was hoping to create, proof that the Kang family fortune stood on a lie about her father. Or she could stay quiet and protect a family that had already taken enough from hers. She chose neither. She chose to tell Daniel the truth to his face. "My father's name was Jerome Patterson," Naomi said, sliding the photograph across his desk. "Your father destroyed him to protect somebody, and I think I deserve to know who." Daniel stared at the photograph for a long, silent moment, and something in his expression broke open, grief and shame arriving together. "I've never seen this," he said. "But I remember my father saying one name near the end of his life, over and over like a debt he never paid. Now I know whose name it was." He looked up at Naomi, and for the first time, there was no boardroom calm left in his voice at all. "I am so sorry. Not because you're my wife. Because it's true, and my family let it stay buried." That night, Ethan wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas and found Naomi crying quietly at the table. He didn't ask why. He just climbed into the chair beside her and rested his small head against her arm. "Are you still going to stay?" he asked. It was the same question he'd asked her 100 times since that first dinner. But tonight it carried the full weight of everything Naomi stood to lose. She wrapped her arm around him and did not answer right away, because for the first time she genuinely did not know. Marcus Kang did know, however, that Naomi had found the photograph, because Grace's archive room had a leak of its own, a junior assistant loyal to Marcus and his money. 2 nights before the board meeting, a story broke online, twisting the truth into a weapon. It claimed Naomi Patterson had married into the Kang family specifically to extort them over a decades-old scandal involving her father, calling her a professional gold digger with a long-planned agenda. Overnight, Naomi's name became a headline she never asked for, and worse, Marcus quietly filed an emergency motion questioning whether Ethan was safe living in a household under this much instability, using the one weapon guaranteed to break both Daniel and Naomi at once. Daniel read the filing standing in his own kitchen, hands shaking in a way his employees had never once seen in 12 years. "He's using my son as leverage," he said, low and furious. "That's not a business move. That's cruelty wearing a suit." Naomi took the papers gently from his hands. "Then we don't let cruelty win by hiding," she said. "We walk into that boardroom and we bring the truth with us out loud, where he can't twist it anymore. Everything you're about to learn happens in the next few minutes, and it changes who Jerome Patterson really was, who really destroyed him, and why Samuel Kang spent his final year trying to fix a mistake he never had the courage to say out loud. If you want to see justice finally reach this family, like this video right now, and stay with me because the truth is about to reach the boardroom." The Monday board meeting was standing room only. Marcus stood first, sliding printed articles across the table, demanding the family stability clause be enforced and Daniel removed as chief executive, effective immediately. Daniel stood to answer him, but Grace Whitfield stood first, an envelope in her trembling hand that she had kept locked away for 11 years. "Before this board votes on anything," Grace said, "you need to hear the letter Samuel Kang wrote before he died." She read it aloud. Samuel confessed that his own brother, Marcus's father, had embezzled funds from the shipping division in 1999 and framed Jerome Patterson to cover his tracks, and Samuel, terrified of losing the company his own father built, signed off on the cover-up and let an innocent man's name be destroyed. Samuel wrote that he tried for years to find Jerome Patterson to make it right, and never could, and he was leaving the truth with Grace, hoping someday it would reach whoever needed it most. The room went utterly silent. Marcus's face drained of color as every board member turned toward him, because everyone in that room now understood exactly whose father the letter was really protecting, and exactly why Marcus had spent the last 3 weeks trying so hard to bury Naomi's name in scandal before she could read it herself. "You knew," Daniel said quietly, looking at his cousin like he was seeing him for the first time. "You've always known, and you let my father carry that shame alone rather than let the truth cost you your seat at this table." Marcus said nothing because there was nothing left to say. Within the hour, the board voted unanimously to remove him. Daniel didn't stop there. He stood in front of that same board, and in front of the reporters waiting outside for a very different story than the one they got, and he did something his father never found the courage to do while he was alive. He cleared Jerome Patterson's name publicly, on the record, and announced the Patterson Logistics Fellowship, funding the careers of workers wrongfully pushed out of the industry the way Naomi's father had been. It didn't undo 23 years of silence, but it was the truth, finally standing in the daylight where it belonged. Later that evening, Daniel found Naomi in the same atrium where the flashbulbs had first caught them. "I never should have let you walk into that gala without warning you what my family might cost you," he said. "I hired you to solve my problem, and I kept protecting my own comfort instead of telling you the truth the moment I suspected it. That wasn't fair to you, and I know an apology doesn't erase it." Naomi studied him for a long moment, not the calm boardroom version of him, but the man underneath, finally standing without armor. "You don't get my trust back just because you said sorry," she told him honestly. "You get it back if you keep showing up like this. Every day. Not just today." Before Daniel could answer, small footsteps ran across the marble floor. Ethan, still in his school uniform, threw his arms around Naomi's waist in front of the board members, the reporters, and everyone who had ever whispered about her. "You're not just pretend anymore, right?" he said, loud enough for the whole atrium to hear. "Please stay forever. Not because Dad needs a wife. Because I need you." The room that had once judged Naomi in silence now watched her kneel down, hold a little boy who had chosen her long before his father legally did, and finally let herself cry the kind of tears that come from being wanted, not needed. "Tell me honestly, would you have forgiven Daniel as quickly as Naomi did? Or would you have made him earn it longer?" I want to know your answer in the comments below. 6 months later, the Kang Tower atrium held a different kind of gathering, small, quiet, daylight pouring through the glass. Naomi Patterson stood in a simple ivory dress, no cameras waiting to catch her off guard this time. Only Ethan holding the rings, and Grace Whitfield crying happily in the front row. Naomi had kept her own name on her own architecture firm, now doing consulting work for Kang Meridian's community housing division, a choice Daniel supported without one word of protest, because he had finally learned that protecting someone and controlling her were never the same thing. Jerome Patterson's name now hung on a plaque in the same lobby where his daughter had once walked in for a job interview that changed everything. This is the truth this story leaves behind. A marriage that starts as a transaction can still become real, but only if both people choose honesty over comfort, again and again, especially when it costs something. Naomi didn't stay because Daniel was a billionaire. She stayed because he finally became a man worth staying for, and because a little boy asked her to, with nothing to gain but her love. This has been Empire City Romance Stories, where every sacrifice has a witness, and every witness eventually tells the truth. If Naomi's story moved you tonight, subscribe so you never miss the next one, like this video to help other viewers find it, and comment the one word that describes how this story made you feel. Turn on notifications because Empire City Romance Stories has a new emotional drama waiting for you very soon. Until then, remember, the truth always finds daylight. We'll see you in the next story.